You don't need to be afraid of your eroticism when you are the decider of it. Remember, you're the person that still chooses in the face of your fantasies how you'll act. You're still the pilot of your ship. You're the driver of your car. You're the author of your story. You're still in the driver's seat. You choose what you will actually do with your fantasies or not. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. In this episode, we'll get to talk about how to make from behind sex positions such as doggy style better. We'll talk about sex toys. We'll talk about unrealistic sexual fantasies. We'll talk about exploring your own body for sexual understanding. We'll also talk about how to treat delayed or premature ejaculation. This is going to be a really fun episode. Just the other day, my wife and I were talking about how we, of all people, were probably the least likely people on the planet to start a podcast and coaching program with the purpose of helping couples improve sex and intimacy. I guess God really does have a sense of humor. And a whole lot of trust. Sex and marriage hasn't always come easy for my wife and I. It's something that we've learned to work towards, and it's something we'll continue to work on because it's very rewarding for us. Part of the joy comes from the building of something we expect to last beyond a lifetime. We know the work we do in our marriage and family blesses not only our lives immediately, but our children and their children's lives too, with the legacy that we'll leave. And we're not alone in this desire and in this belief. I recently finished working with a wonderful couple in my coaching program. They've been married for nearly 2 decades. They got along really well in all areas of their marriage, but had arguments when it came to sex. A recent disagreement flared up where the husband was advocating for something novel and adventurous, and the wife was ambivalent. They looked at each other as the problem, and they noticed that this was a common pattern in their marriage. So they signed up for my coaching program to get to the bottom of it. My program is different from anything else out there. Not only are there an expert team of highly skilled and caring coaches, there's an in-depth course. There's also a strong community aspect where you can learn from peers and support each other. It's designed for couples that are busy in the thick of life, and we want to make everything convenient and easy to access so that you'll actually want to participate and do the program. Anyway, one of the blessings of effective marriage coaching is helping you see your blind spots. You can't see them on your own. That's why they're called blind spots. But once you point it out, making the invisible visible, you can then choose to make different choices around those things. So that's what this couple I'm telling you about did. He saw a blind spot in himself through coaching that related to his commitment to intimacy and fully supporting his wife, and it played out in the bedroom. Because he hedged, it was good judgment on her part to not step fully into intimate aspects of the marriage. This is just one of several ahas and epiphanies that they experienced through marriage coaching. And I would like you to experience this too. The full program details are available on my website at getyourmarriageon.com. And while you're there, be sure to check out our upcoming retreats, the virtual sex and intimacy retreat in July and the in-person couples retreat in October. I appreciate your anonymous questions. If you'd like to ask me a question anonymously, go to getyourmarriageon.com, click on resources, and then anonymous questions. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Here's the first question. So on our last episode, I saw the topic of swinging come up. I've struggled with this fantasy for years, and now I'm a married husband with kids. I am a follower of Jesus and believe it to be wrong based on scripture. We've been married 4 years, and 6 years I've been free from the thought of it. The last 2 years it has come back, and my wife just isn't aware of this fantasy of mine. I really just want to know your thoughts from a biblical perspective. Is it okay to want to see my wife with another man? Should I even mention this fantasy to her? Although this question mentions swinging, I think this could be about anything you fantasize about that may or may not be in line with your morals. For the record, I personally am not in favor of swinging or anything extramarital when it comes to sex. But this question could have been about a number of other things, such as oral sex, lingerie, sex toys, and so on. As I answer, please see if you can find the principle and live the principle behind it all. Another principle I follow is not to yuck another person's yum. What we're drawn to sexually is as unique as our fingerprints. No people have the same erotic blueprint. The funny thing about human sexuality is that most of our fantasies are not quote unquote biblical. Think about it. They're not quite always morally upright, are they? And that's the very thing that excites this very irrational part of our brain and some of the beauty we find in others during sex. That we can share this irrational, off limits area with our hair down, and it's not always so cleaned up. This part of ourselves with someone else. And that's what makes sex so special, right? To put it another way, there's an aspect about human sexuality that is drawn to the perverse. Dr. Esther Perel, a researcher that wrote a fantastic book on human eroticism, says, most of us get turned on at night by the very things that we'll demonstrate against in the light of day. Fantasies are fantasies by definition because they're things that aren't real, that aren't in real life, that we never do in real life. So, where do these fantasies come from? Most of the things we feel drawn to in our sexual fantasies have their roots in our very early child development. It's very similar to how we developed our sense of humor as a child. Some things just appeal to us. So, how do you make sense of things that you're drawn to if they're not in line with what you want to do morally? Well, you might find the idea of watching your wife be with another man very exciting. But just because you like the idea doesn't mean you need to act on it. You don't need to be afraid of your eroticism when you are the decider of it. Remember, you're the person that still chooses in the face of your fantasies how you'll act. You're still the pilot of your ship. You're the driver of your car. You're the author of your story. You're still in the driver's seat. You choose what you will actually do with your fantasies or not. I like to think of eroticism as a fireplace. You want a place where the fire can burn bright, giving you warmth and light, but you want it to be contained or else it'll burn your house down, right? It's also a shame if your house has a fireplace that you never light or use. So, explore your fantasies, but be the decider of them, and put them in boundaries that support your highest values and morals, which is like putting the fire in the fireplace. And have fun. Now, for the last part of your question, should you tell your wife about your fantasy? Well, that's a great question. In general, I think when we share something really deep and core about ourselves with our spouse, that's a very intimate thing to do, especially when we're being honest about it. Telling your wife that you want to see her with another man may not go over very well, I'm assuming. So probably a better way to share this is, I am struggling with this thought where there's something I know my brain is saying it really appeals to me, my eroticism, but it's not biblical. And maybe just sharing the struggle you have about the fantasy, that can be a very intimate thing. Now, it's supposed to feel uncomfortable sharing your fantasies. That's because that's at the core of it, right? They're so personal to us. But it's also very intimate to share things with our spouse. And likewise, wouldn't you want your spouse to share deep and important things about her with you yourself? The principle to follow here is look to the fruit. If I share this with her, or share this aspect of me with her, is it letting her into my life? Is it letting her into my heart? Are we creating something a little more intimate here, more honest and more real by sharing and opening my heart here? And that's the fruit you want to look for. So that's my recommendation as to whether you should share this with your wife. Here's the second question. I love your podcasts. My husband and I have started a new tradition where we listen to your podcast on the way to work and then we discuss it. It has helped us begin difficult topics that may otherwise be hard to bring up. Anyway, I hear frequently in your podcasts of the importance of the woman to take time to explore herself. My question is, what exactly entails exploring, and when is this to be done, with my spouse or by myself? I still feel some shame and guilt surrounding giving myself any pleasure, so I can't fully relax. Any tips there? Thanks. I'm so glad you like the podcast, and I love your tradition. That's such a great idea. And these podcasts are designed to be a conversation starter between you and your spouse, right? First of all, I want to say I don't advocate for anything that goes against your beliefs. So if you feel this is morally wrong to do, like this feels sinful for you, then by doing it, you're going to feel worse afterwards. So I don't recommend doing anything against that. That being said, let me explain a few things that I think that might be helpful. Yes, I've touched on the idea that it's important for women to take time to explore themselves. And let me explain my thinking around this. And I recognize I'm quite biased here in my opinion, speaking as a man. Ultrasound images of babies developing in their mother's womb show that children developing in the mother's womb touch their own genitals often. It's normal for babies after they're born to be interested in their various body sensations, including genital touch. This is critical to a child's brain development. It helps form healthy neural pathways as a brain learns to associate various sensations with parts of the body and to recognize the pleasurable sensations too. Pleasure is a very important part of life. And I think boys have an advantage here because they touch themselves when they pee. They're constantly making and reinforcing the neural connection that touching one's penis feels good, even if he's just peeing. As boys hit puberty and become young men in their teenage years, their body continues to develop its hardware. Adolescent boys experience erections, sometimes spontaneous and embarrassing, might I add, especially when waking up from sleep. And erections feel great. All this to say, when it comes to pleasure, boys and men are used to knowing what feels good sexually to them. It's almost second nature. In contrast, and generally speaking, culturally, women don't develop the same neural connections to their sexual pleasure. The pleasure center for women is the clitoris, and it's more inside and tucked away. I have no data on this, but perhaps girls are less prone to think it's proper to touch themselves than boys do think it's okay to touch themselves. Now, fast forward to the honeymoon, and a couple is learning how to share sexual pleasure. What feels good to him comes naturally. Yet, for many women, what feels good to her is still a mystery. She expects him to know what to do, and frankly, he is just as clueless as she is. This is a common trope you hear in a lot of honeymoon horror stories, right? And we laugh about it. The big advantage for a woman to know what kind of touch she likes isn't just head knowledge. It's also body knowledge, body learning. It's developing and strengthening the neural pathways so that you can communicate effectively to your spouse what kind of touch you like in sex. Self-exploration also invites you to address your attitudes that you have about your God-given body and its amazing intricacies and potential for pleasure. Exploring yourself helps you appreciate your design in profound ways. It is a gift you can give yourself and your spouse as you develop more confidence in your ability to trust your body's sexual functioning. Consider this analogy. You can read every book written on how to ride a bike, but until you actually get on a bike and start trying to pedal and learn, you'll never really learn how to balance yourself and ride a bike well. There are some things that only come from body learning. I think sexual pleasure and orgasm is one of those. It takes physical action to grow the neural pathways needed to learn how to enjoy sex to its fullest, not just reading or listening alone. And this is one of the blessings that we have as being embodied beings. Having a body allows us to learn these things that we wouldn't learn otherwise if we didn't have a body. And here's another angle on this too. There was a study I read once where they had a group of 70 married women, which frankly is a pretty small sample size, but I think their results were still pretty instructive. They surveyed the women on their overall marital satisfaction and sexual satisfaction in the relationship. They found that all of the women who reported that they masturbate consistently scored higher in their overall marital and sexual satisfaction compared to women that don't. I don't know if this is causation or correlation here. Perhaps a woman that's more open to the idea of masturbation will also be more interested in pursuing sexual pleasure in her marriage, right? And to be clear, I'm not advocating for masturbation in a selfish way that takes one's sexuality away from their marriage. Pleasure matters, and it's completely possible to enjoy sexual pleasure in ways that build your relationship, even if it's you doing the touching rather than your spouse. The idea of touching yourself might be daunting. You might feel guilty or some shame about it. It might feel really awkward. It might be something you don't want to do in the presence of your spouse, at least at first, or something you'll only feel comfortable if you do it together. Whatever path you choose, I do believe that pushing yourself to embrace your sexuality and explore your own sexual potential only has upsides for your marriage. It's worth it to persevere through the initial discomfort and awkwardness of self-exploration, to step outside your comfort zone, to enjoy the possibilities that await you and your spouse. One last note. Many women struggle having an orgasm. Learning your own body and what touch is pleasurable is a step towards troubleshooting this. This has definitely been our experience in our marriage, and I am grateful for the courageous woman I'm married to, that she was willing to figure this out for herself. Her openness with me and involving me in her process of understanding her body has been a great gift to me. Her dedication to exploring her sexuality not only blesses her, but it blesses our marriage 100-fold. Here's the third question. I am a newlywed and must have delayed ejaculation because I haven't been able to ejaculate in my wife, although I do in my sleep sometimes. I know I get anxious, but it has been over a year and still haven't had progress with this. Any advice? By the way, congratulations on your recent wedding. Delayed ejaculation is a very common sexual concern. In many ways, it has the same root cause as premature ejaculation, where you come too fast. So, my advice below will help men with premature ejaculation as well. I highly recommend you don't take this problem lightly, and you need to take it seriously. You need to be proactive and take action and address the issue, because it's really unkind to yourself and to your spouse to have a treatable sexual dysfunction and then choose not to do anything about it. The first step is to see if there's any underlying physical cause to your delayed ejaculation. Sometimes it could just be nerve damage or having not enough nerve sensitivity to that part of your body. Sometimes it could be low testosterone. Seeing that you are newlywed, I'm assuming you're young, and we'll assume that this is not a physical health issue here. So it's probably a psychological issue, because the mind is a very powerful override to our sexual functioning, and for good reason, right? You don't want to just go hump the mailman because you're in the mood. Our mind can override our sexual impulses. Yet, you want to be in control of your sexual impulses, not let your mind have control over you, right? So sometimes our mind is interfering with our desired sexual outcomes. So, you mentioned you've been anxious in sex. I am willing to guess this is still an underlying cause for you. Are you anxious during sex? What are you anxious about? Are you anxious about performance? Are you anxious about your wife's experience and her expectations for you? Are you anxious about being anxious? You see how that kind of interferes too? One idea I have for you is learn how to breathe and relax during sex and to take it very slow. Sometimes you can make sex a lot less about a goal, such as achieving orgasm, but about celebrating being together as husband and wife. Can you take the time to gaze into each other's eyes and just love being together? Can you just enjoy the skin on skin and breathing together? That closeness can be just exhilarating in and of itself. Can you take the focus off of your penis and put your attention into your wife's pleasure for a season to really let go and just love her wholeheartedly through sex? I believe touch is a very powerful language. It can convey deep meanings of love, admiration, attraction, and desire. Let your touch communicate how you feel about her. I have another analogy that might be helpful to you. Let's say you're trying to listen to a recording of something in a place with a lot of background noise. Let's pretend this podcast. One solution would be to turn up the volume so you can hear it better. Another option would be to take it to a quieter place so you can really focus on what's being said without the distraction. The same goes for sexual stimulation. Sometimes the solution might be to ramp up the arousal and intensity of the sexual stimulation. In other words, can you get yourself really, really turned on? Because that might help you with your delayed ejaculation. Other times, it might be more about turning inward and quieting down the background noise that's interfering with sexual pleasure. These might be turning inward to face your feelings of discouragement, inadequacy, or busyness and distractions with work or other obligations, or might be tuning in to that pressure to perform well or to keep your wife happy and so on. By turning inward and tuning down the distractions, you might be able to find your ability to relax and just enjoy sex. And you might see that it comes easier, pun intended. Last of all, remember, sex is shared pleasure. So even though your penis might not function as well, you still have a tongue, you still have fingers, you have toys. There's other ways you can give great wholehearted pleasure to your wife. So it's a fantastic experience that you'll both want to participate in. And don't let the unpredictability of your penis's performance prevent you from having more pleasure together. Push yourself here. Next question. I'm trying to find any solid resources on sex from behind. My wife and I have tried it, but it seems very awkward from a position standpoint, and it's very difficult to prevent slipping out. I think I'm fairly average male, so I'm not quite sure how it's supposed to work so easily. I'm about 10 inches taller than my wife, so I know that complicates certain positions. Any help is appreciated. Thank you. Thanks for this question. And I'm assuming you're talking about sex positions where she's probably on all fours and you're penetrating from behind. Some people call this doggy style, but I prefer to call it stallion style because that sounds way more manly. This position isn't so much about thrusting as it is about sliding gracefully. Some women really like this position because they can put themselves in control of the motion. He kneels there completely still while she does the moving and the rocking back and forth. For others, he can put hands on her hips and guide himself slowly and carefully by rocking his pelvis forward and back rather than trying to thrust in and out. So it's more of a rocking motion, like you're tilting your pelvis in, under, and then back. Kind of like if you were doing yoga, you do the cat-cow pose, how it's really more of a function of your hips curling in and out. It's more like that than it is about thrusting in and out. That's, I think, where the pleasure is in this kind of position. Now, let's get really practical here. To prevent slipping out, men usually need to reach around with one arm and cup a hand around the entrance of the vagina to guide the penis. The other benefit to putting your hand near her entrance is you can add direct clitoral stimulation right to her clitoris, which might be very welcomed for her. You can also switch up this position by having her lay over sideways the arm of a sofa, and it seems to work better for some people in that position, and you have less slippage. From behind positions might also work better for you if she lays completely flat on the bed or the floor, and you make small, shallow thrusts. For women, they have more sensation at the entrance of the vagina than deeper inside. So, shallow thrusts in positions like these tend to feel way more pleasurable. While laying flat, she can use her own hand to guide the penis. She could touch her own clitoris to add more stimulation, or position a small vibrator for added pleasure too. And hey, if you slip out, no big deal. Slip back in. Relax and have fun. Sex isn't a performance. It's about having fun together and being intimate. One last tip. If you have a large mirror, try this stallion style position in front of it so you get the eye contact. Sometimes hotels have a full body mirror, and this is a favorite position because you can take advantage of the mirrors and seeing each other enjoy yourselves thoroughly. All right, here's the last question today. What is the number one sex toy you recommend for married Christian couples? I love this question, and I like sex toys. The very best sex toy for married Christian couples is, ready? Ready for it? Wait for the answer. Here it comes. The very best toy is the one that works for your bodies and its configuration and is in line with what feels right. Let me explain. Look around and you'll see everyone has two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. But our nose, eyes, and mouths are configured differently. So as it is with our genitals, right? Our genitals look different from one person to another person's genitals. Also, the way your pleasure-sensing nerves are configured in your body is going to vary from one person to another. We also have different tastes and preferences. No two people are going to be exactly alike. So, when talking about sex toys designed for women specifically, some toys will respond better to her than others because the woman's personal nerve configuration is going to be different from her body to the next lady's body. Some sex toys are designed to have direct clitoral stimulation using a sucking type of a motion directly on the clitoris. And there are women that report having orgasms within 2 minutes or 3 minutes or faster with them because it hits the right spot for them. While other women try the exact same toy and they find it very irritating and uncomfortable, it's because their nerve configurations are different. Some women really like the G-spot area of their body touched and stimulated, while others find it really uncomfortable. Some people just like really indirect stimulation that vibrates with a really low rumbly feel. Others prefer a more buzzy feel. So it really is going to depend on your body and your body's configurations. My advice is to set aside a budget and buy 3 or 4 different toys and experiment with each of them and see which one your body best responds to with your body type. In addition, I think it's important that you make this a joint decision on how you're going to use toys in your marriage bed. I've heard tales of husbands buying toys for their wives as a surprise, and the surprise was unwanted. Or she wants to incorporate toys into their lovemaking repertoire, but he feels intimidated by them, as if they're going to replace him in bed. It's important to discuss these things openly in your marriage. If there are differences in desire here, this is a great opportunity for you to work together and improve intimacy in your marriage. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I think about you all the time. You're in my prayers. I really want to serve you and help you improve intimacy in your marriage. Please be sure to send me any anonymous questions you'd like for future Q&A episodes, or if there's any specific topic that you'd like a deep dive on to help you in your marriage. Also, check out getyourmarriageon.com for tons of more resources for you and your marriage, and go get your marriage on.